The top meta Yu-Gi-Oh strategies post YCS remote and all of the events over this weekend. Big dog, since the last time we done a meta tier list, so many things have changed. Not only will I be giving you my thoughts, I will also be giving you the analytics backed up to tell you what are the best decks in the game, all the way down to you're gonna have to be a player to make these work. My man, while I think the very top of Yu-Gi-Oh could feel a little saturated, it's really interesting to see how many other strategies are fighting for dominance and strategies that can compete. It's going to be crazy to talk about those Yu-Gi-Oh strategies, but enough of my yapping. Let's go ahead and jump on in. What's going on with y'all, big dog? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that your day phenomenal, exquisite, amazing. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. Now, like I said before, I am going to be doing an updated meta tier list post YCS remote and the events that happened over the weekend, but the criteria for this tier list is actually going to be a little bit deeper. The first criteria is that I use strategies that I talked about from the last meta tier list post YCS Niagara, and I'm going to be giving you my updated thoughts on these strategies as well as the analytics behind it. The second is that I also included all of the Yu-Gi-Oh strategies that have been fairly competitive throughout the format so far. So pretty much what I'm saying statistically is if this strategy has made the tier list, if it's one of those two categories, which means that you can very much win with it despite what it may seem at the top scales of some of the most competitive events. And what this tier list is designed to do is to help sort on how easy it is to win with these appropriate decks and how much dedication and time you're going to need to be putting into these strategies. Basically what I'm saying is that every single one of these decks is already a winner, big dog. We eating W's like Cheerios, and you know my old self.
Lot of Cheerios.
Honey Nut's the best, man. I'm not arguing with y'all. And now that we have the criteria out of the way, I'm going to shuffle these things up just to keep it interesting. But now that I got all of that out of the way, I actually want to start this tier list by talking about the top 3 Yu-Gi-Oh decks. And these have been the top 3 decks in Yu-Gi-Oh for quite some time. On my last tier list, I did put Tenpai Dragon a little bit lower, but that's because statistically, it was a weaker deck. But to break it down, the reason why these 3 strategies are so powerful is because they do a couple of things. I talked about this on my meta tier list, so I'll be really brief with it, is that first, all 3 of these strategies make your opponent go minus. Basically what I mean when I say go minus is that it forces your opponent to trade cards to be able to stop their cards, but doesn't really stop their cards. They can keep playing. The second is that all 3 of these strategies have some really unfair things to deal with. Snake Eyes being one of the most versatile decks in the format, it can be pure, Azamita, Fiendsmith, Fire King, hell, it could be whatever it want. I mean, we just saw a Snake Eyes Crystal Beast deck top a YCS not too long ago. Tenpai Dragon getting a bad rep for Master Duel players as being brain dead, but actually being a deck that can be unfair when it comes to its OTKs. Bro, I've thrown hand traps, lawn chairs, and kitchen sinks at this deck. It's almost unstoppable when it's on. Easily one of the best board-breaking Yu-Gi-Oh decks right now. And then Yubel, just being Yubel. Summon Yubel? Oh, that's some nice monsters you got on the field.
Nightmare Pain game?
Yubel in my eyes is a complete anomaly because just when you count this deck out, it gets into the finals of YCS remote and starts doing some considerable damage. So if you are jumping into the format and wanted to play the best deck available, these 3 will be your choices, and I believe in that order as well. Let's go ahead and start off with Ritual Beast. This deck is pretty freaking good when it comes to topping. In actuality, Ritual Beast is either statistically the 4th or the 5th most topping Yu-Gi-Oh deck. I personally think that the strategy is really good, but there is one huge knock on it: the quality of those tops. Hear me out, big dog. Walk with me for a second, because I don't want to disappoint you. One thing that I have noticed about Ritual Beast is that when it comes to the big event, Ritual Beast almost disappears. A lot of the success from this deck comes from the lower level events, which I don't think that it's necessarily terrible. It's actually pretty good considering that Ritual Beast has some pretty toxic cards. Dimension Shifter, Thunder Dragon Colossus, and Arc Nemesis Protos are all cards that come to mind that can be incredibly frustrating if this was a top Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Because in actuality, one of the best things that's checking Ritual Beast is that players are skilled enough to be able to play around these cards. Nevertheless, it's still a good deck with a quantity amount of tops. I snubbed this deck out of my top 5 meta decks, and I think that it actually comes true when you start looking at the statistics. It's a strategy that can compete. Keep in mind, Ritual Beast players, before you come at me with pitchforks, I want you to know that this tier list is a tier list of winners. Every single one of these strategies is good. It's just when it comes to the highest level of events, do you trust Ritual Beast to take it? I don't. But when it comes to overall competition, this deck is pretty damn good. I think we can agree with that. So put your pitchforks down, Ritual Beast players, but branded players, pick them up. Probably hated by the community. I know it. I know. And these type of tier lists, I never want to lead you guys with just my thoughts. I want to bring statistics into the equation as well. Statistically, branded isn't a good deck. It's not a player, a non-factor. To give you guys an analogy, I think that branded players are LeBron James, and the actual deck, Bronny James right now. Y'all got high expectations for a deck that's going to the G League. The Rogue tier list. Again, branded players, I do not think that the deck is bad. But statistically, I think that it genuinely takes a good pilot to play. If it makes you guys feel better, I have something called the TJ bar. Basically what I mean is that if TJ can easily play your deck, it's probably not really hard to play. But if it's been some time and TJ still can't play the deck correctly, hard to play. When TJ doesn't have access to branded fusion, his play is to normal summon Fallen Albaz and pray. This is even when he's going first. That boy still think it's a quick effect. I don't even know what to do to help him. But in all seriousness, big dog, ever since this deck lost the gimmick puppet lock, it's been incredibly hard to play. And I think it's one of those strategies that take an excellent player to be able to pilot. So you guys put your pitchforks down too, please. Next is Exodia. Now, I like to dust my shoulders off when it comes to Exodia, because in my last tier list and the tier lists that have had Exodia post the Infinite Forbidden set, I said that this deck was bonkers. And the biggest reason is the new Heart of the Blue Ice, allowing you to get another access to Millennium Ankh, making the deck a lot more consistent. With that, in this Infinite Forbidden format, Exodia has notched another quality Yu-Gi-Oh top. And going back and looking at the statistics, this deck has done nothing but notch quality tops in every major event. I think the contrary from Ritual Beast to Exodia needs to be studied, because this deck, in my opinion, is stronger than Ritual Beast, even though Ritual Beast has more success. And it's genuinely because the quality of competition that Exodia has to face and is successful against. Also, let's keep it a bean, big dog. This is actually a strong strategy against the top meta, not only because of having access to cards like Secret Village of the Spellcasters, but those Exodia spell and trap cards are the real deal. And then you already know it's always gonna be that player like me in the corner, gonna be playing those old school boomer cards. I'ma sign in some backup soldiers, and I'ma win the game the old fashioned way, getting all 5 pieces to my hand. It ain't happened yet, but it's gonna happen, I promise you. Now, I bet you're probably wondering, Callie, how the hell did Scareclaw get here? It's simple. While I haven't seen the exact deck just yet, no, I'm pretty confident that the deck did not use cards like Scarecrow, Acro, and Balone. In fact, I'm pretty confident that the deck took an approach that I took a couple of formats ago. Scarecrow right card is really, really good. It's a free summon that can draw you a card and search a spell card. And also, the entire Scareclaw engine can be accessed with Kashtira Finra, one of the most dangerous cards in the game. I think the combination of those two makes Scareclaw as an engine incredibly deadly. But if you also remember, I said that Snake Eyes can pretty much make anything deadly. You remember that Snake Eyes Crystal Beast deck I was talking about? Anything can be deadly. Regardless, the Scareclaw is a perfect bridge if you're playing Fiendsmith or Azamina, and then going into your Snake Eyes combo. I think that this variant could be here to stay. While it does require a lot of engine, it's a strategy that can compete. That's right, Scareclaw players, rejoice. You guys got it out the mud. You're finally here. You might not be playing Scareclaw tryhard, but you're still a pretty solid deck right now with Snake Eyes. I don't know exactly how the community is going to feel about that, so let me know what you think. Chimera has been one of the most disappointing decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! It got Fiendsmith and players were really hype on this train. Then in the next set, it got Azamina, cards that are illusion monsters that make the deck even stronger. And still, the most perplexing thing about this is that this deck has not had a quality top at the highest level of competition. Make no mistake, it is still a competitor. But when it comes down to it, I think that this deck is like Ritual Beast except worse, regional level. Still a really powerful deck into this format, but not enough quality wins to be able to consider it a little bit greater. I think that if you're playing Chimera, you can be able to take this to the regionals and do fairly well. But as far as the highest levels, it's going to be a lot harder. Not impossible, just harder. Now, Sprite doesn't really have much going for it this format. I've seen a lot of players use the Fiendsmith line inside of Sprite, which I don't think is bad, but that probably could be served for other Yu-Gi-Oh strategies. Take, for example, decks like Scareclaw, Chimera, and even Exodia could use it a little bit better. I don't think that it's a bad deck, but I'm definitely going to put it in Takes a Good Pilot. For Sprite right now, nothing really sticks out, so as a Yu-Gi-Oh player, you're going to have to put in the extra work to make it successful. And I would also say the exact same thing for Plants. It takes a good pilot. Plants are not bad. In actuality, I think when another European event comes around, Plants will be there. But at this point in time, I think we pretty much have to confirm it takes dedicated Plant players to be able to play this deck and be successful with it, and that's pretty much exactly what Takes a Good Pilot means. Salamangreat has taken an interesting trajectory because when we first talked about it, it was a pretty strong Yu-Gi-Oh deck. It was one of those strategies that despite being hit with both the Molcharmy cards, it could easily just make Baguska, Salamangreat roar, and not a lot of decks can crack that. I still believe that. Regardless, it is one of those strategies that probably takes a good pilot, a player that understands how Salamangreat operates and how to be able to go against those big decks. Mementos, my guys. The Meme Team. The Bone Party. In my top 5 meta decks, I talked about this deck's ascension and even snubbed Ritual Beast for it. It seems that dividends are paying off because it is a strategy that did top a remote YCS and has been doing relatively well with the regional level. I think the Meme Team is a little bit better. I think it's one of the next best Yu-Gi-Oh strategies. Statistically, it's at 4th or 5th for the deck with the most tops, and it's also getting those quality wins. Pearly is getting regional success, but not the high-level success that players would want it to be. I think it's one of the really solid budget Yu-Gi-Oh decks, but at its strongest, it is a regional level Yu-Gi-Oh strategy. Look, big dog, nobody gonna be questioning a fat cat and summoning ex-Pearly Noir, but one thing that we 100% will question is its ability to be able to win at a high level. And now that brings us to Unchained. I remember my Rogue tier list, I talked about this deck as being incredibly strong. Despite the Charmy cards being into the meta, Unchained is really good at being able to establish boards and punish Yu-Gi-Oh players. Since that video, Unchained has not only got some pretty recognizable tops, but also the top 16 at the YCS. I'm gonna go ahead and set the expectations a little bit higher, and I'm gonna say that Unchained is one of the next best Yu-Gi-Oh decks. Let's face it, guys, Unchained is crazy. It's simply one of the better Yu-Gi-Oh decks that rewards Yu-Gi-Oh players for skill. But what makes Unchained even more dangerous is that it's comfortable going second, and when going first, it makes some deadly boards. I also think the inclusion of Musketeers inside of Unchained will eventually lead to a Fiendsmith pile deck, similar to how we look at Dragon decks or Plant decks, and there's a lot more room for this strategy to go. Kashtira as an engine is crazy. You guys already know I've talked about it in Scareclaw being pretty much Scareclaw combo alongside of your Fiendsmith and Azamina cards. It's stupid that Kashtira Fenrir can be a disruption, but also can be food for your Azamina cards, a starter for your Scareclaw cards, or just getting you another Kashtira Fenrir for follow-up. Kashtira as a deck takes it a little bit further. With extra deck space being so tight, Kashtira Unicorn forces players to make tough decisions or potentially lose cards in their extra deck that can cost them the game. One of the only problems that I've ever had with this strategy is consistency, but it looks like players are finding a decent pace for this strategy to be one of the next best. It has my blessings. Kashtira by itself may not have the credibility. It may not have the tops, but what it does have is quality. In the areas where Kashtira has succeeded, it's definitely went above and beyond expectations. And its benefits in the cards that plays makes it formidable. Now, Rescue Ace has been disappointing. In my last meta tier list, I pegged it as one of the top decks in the game. And unfortunately, that has not been the case. While it's doing pretty decent at a regional level, Rescue Ace is not doing good when it matters the most. It's still a strategy that is really powerful. I mean, if you summon Rescue Ace Turbulence and resolve its effect, you winning! I'm in danger. I still think that Rescue Ace is one of those strategies that can compete, and I love that it's a lot more of a budget deck than some of these other strategies. Labyrinth was also a strategy that was placed really high and has done decent throughout the format, but not enough to merit as a next best or a best deck. I think when the new Raziel and Malice strategy comes out, Mummy Milkers is going to be back at the top. But for right now, I think it's another strategy that can compete. Make no mistake, Labyrinth still has access to some of the best cards in the game to beating the top decks. Dimensional Barrier to shut out Tenpai Dragon or whatever other strategy from its core mechanic in the extra deck, and different Dimension Ground for everything else. Sky Strikers made a deep playoff run at the last YCS, but since then, it's been just like my dad. I don't want to say missing in action, but definitely went out for some milk. It'll be back one day. Amazing. Considering that Sky Striker is getting more support, I would still say it's a strong Yu-Gi-Oh deck, but statistics tell us that it takes a good pilot. One of the best Sky Striker players in the world playing Sky Striker probably means that he's going to do well. But as far as you playing Sky Striker, look man, you could do it. I believe in you. Results may not. Now, Whitewoods is interesting is because it does have some pretty big tops. Whitewoods feels almost the opposite of Ritual Beast. Big tops at big events, but everywhere else, it's where you go. While statistically it seems like one of the better decks, I think that Whitewoods benefits from a Yu-Gi-Oh meta where things are a little bit more strict. When there's decks that you know you're playing against, this deck can do well, but when it's a random assortment of decks, you can struggle. That being said, I'm gonna put it in can compete, but I think both Whitewoods and Ritual Beast have the opportunity to be in that next best type competitive level, but also can be in that regional level type of level. It just depends on the time of day, the deck you're playing, and everything else. Dinomorphia. Hands down, Dinomorphia is a top budget Yu-Gi-Oh deck. For the cost of some McDonald's chicken nuggets, you can build the entire deck, main, extra, side, and slide. The cons is that if you did that, the regional level is probably the upper limit, right? Some quality tops at the regional level means that Dinomorphia should not be mixed with. Dinomorphia Rexstorm is still a really powerful card. But when it comes to that elite level of play, you pay chicken nugget price for this deck. You go get chicken nugget service. Some of the times it's good, satisfying, fulfilling. Other times, you wonder what chicken nuggets are really made of. Now, Mermail is another strategy with quite the few quality wins. And I find it really cool because in the OCG, Mermail doesn't do enough. I think mainly one of the contributors is Maxi, but in the TCG, Mermail low-key cooking. Maybe boiling, but cooking. Now, this is going to be a bold take because Mermail does not have the type of pedigree that Whitewoods and Ritual Beast have. So it is a strategy that could be and could compete. But I'm gonna go ahead and give it the nod with a YCS top and say that it's trending towards next best. I think it's also very justifiable to put Mermail down here and be in this type of level. And it's mainly because right now it's Mermail's coming out party. It's really hard to see if this was just a really good player, which by the way, it was a really good player playing the deck, or if the strategy can actually hang with the big dogs. For right now, I'm gonna give it the benefit of the doubt, and it'll be really interesting to see in the upcoming weeks, as well as the next YCS, if the deck will be able to hang. And even making remarks back to Whitewoods and Ritual Beast, it would also be really interesting to see something like this. I think it would be crazy. And to be honest, I think that this is pretty representative of what the format could be. These Yu-Gi-Oh strategies are not no slouch, but statistically, they're probably better suited off right here. Stun. A lot of you guys know me as a stun hater, but when it comes to giving you guys information that's pertinent for your Yu-Gi-Oh career normally institutes money. And I don't know if a stream deck, a dice, and whatever that thing is that put cards in it counts as money. I think stun is definitely not takes a good pilot, but regional up. Guys, there's nothing clever or smart about playing stun. If you ask me, it all comes down to deck building. But another thing that I will say about stun is that it's really good against bad players and really bad against really good players. It's a reason why we could potentially see stun inside of top events, but it's also the reason why stun has never gotten deep inside of top events. Definitely one of those decks that can get you your first invite or another invite, but I wouldn't count it as a deck that wins the whole thing. Centurion has proven itself as one of the next best Yu-Gi-Oh strategies easily, dog. It just keeps topping, and it doesn't matter what variant of Centurion you're playing. Centurion Bestial, Centurion Pure, Super Heavy Samurai, Centurion, Whitewoods. And I think one of the cool things about this is that players are still trying to figure out this deck and fix its weaknesses. It's been pretty dope though, and actually beneficial. And lastly is Voiceless Voice. Voiceless Voice is another strategy that I think simply can compete. And a lot of things that these decks have in common, well, except for Scareclaw, but that's a kind of an outlier here, is that every single one of these strategies has the accolades of regional wins. They also have the ability to get into the next best category. And I would say the only thing that's bringing them back is their statistics. So it really depends on you guys, the players, to be able to convince me to say statistically, this deck's pretty good. I can't deny it. So if you guys disagree with any of these decks placings, then go ahead and let me know down below in the comment section. But more importantly, deck up, young homie. Get your gods together, as Joey would say. Understand that you're playing one of those decks that can be really good, but prove to the world why it's so much better. And that's all that I have for the meta tier list post YCS remote and the regional weekend. I think the next time around we're going to be doing a rogue tier list, so if there's some rogue strategies that you really want to see, let me know down below in the comment section. But until then, you can always check out these videos so I can catch you on the next one.